Hi guys, welcome to April and this month's dispatches, and quite an interesting little batch of dispatches as well. As you can see before you, it's a fairly good selection, but let's begin at the beginning with right down here from our Life of Jesus collection, and this is quite appropriate because this is Easter, and of course we're celebrating Easter, and we're celebrating. Uh, the last few days of Jesus' life on earth, where first of all it began with him entering the city of Jerusalem for Passover on what we now call Palm Sunday. And those Christians among you, and I like to include myself as not a particularly good member, but I am a member of that. Uh, we decided to do Jesus on the donkey entering the city of Jerusalem, being led by a young boy through the cheering crowds and the very welcoming populace. Now, that was all going to change within a few days. But at this point, everything was glorious. So we have a classic image of Jesus on the donkey, and that will be released early this month. Now, we'll move from Jesus on a donkey entering Jerusalem to another famous city, and in this case, San Antonio, which, as many of you know, is the other home of King and Country, where we've got King and Country Texas, our store there. Uh, and you'll see here this book, The Gates of the Alamo, by author Stephen Harrigan. I actually read this novel many years ago. It's amazing. It's, I think, in many respects, although it's obviously a work of fiction, it's one of the most factual works of fiction I've ever read. And it basically tells the story of event, and the climax is the Battle of the Alamo. And the hero of the novel inadvertently ends up at the battle. So let me recommend the book to you. It's a wonderful book. Really look out for it. The Gates of the Alamo. Now, in front of the book here, you'll see our latest batch of Santa Anna's infantry. And you'll see a little batch here at the back and another little batch at the front. But let me tell you about the batch at the back, first of all. Most importantly, you'll see a pair of Mexican soldiers grasping one of their handmade ladders, and they're rushing obviously towards the wall on that fateful final day of the siege of the Alamo. And next to them, perhaps encouraging them on, is another soldier, musket in one hand, and he's obviously gesturing with the other. And on the opposite side, two more singles soldados in different aspects of loading and getting ready to fire another shot. So all of these, a set of two, that's exactly as is, two figure set. All of the other figures here, the three other figures, are all individual figures. Down the front is what we're calling, I should say, casualties of war. And we've got one certainly wounded and three either very seriously wounded or perhaps dead Mexican soldiers. And again, what makes it interesting is two of the soldiers have lost their shakos, but they haven't lost them because they're right here, but they're not part of the figure. And you'll see that I think three of all four have individual Mexican muskets. So that little set, if you're an Alamo collector, this is a great addition to your collection. And again, they're all painted in the same style, the same regiment as all the new Santa Anna's infantry that we've been releasing over the last couple of months. I should let you know that we're hard at work. I just met with two of our top sculptors last week and approved another big batch of Alamo figures. This time you'll be happy to know there's more than a few defenders among them. So look out for those in the coming months. But for the moment, that's those guys there. Now, right down the front here, and as you know, there's a lot of trouble going on in the Middle East. Well, then again, when is there not trouble in the Middle East? But in this case, this is an addition to our Israeli Defense Forces set. and it's the M151 Mutt. Again, some of you are familiar with it if you're a Vietnam collector. We introduced the Mutt for that collection. We did two different versions. One was a military police one, and the other was a regular US Marine Corps one, each of them mounting um, a machine gun on the back on a pindle mount. Now, that gave me the idea that we should do an Israeli version. The I.D.F, I don't know if it still has, but it certainly had back in the 70s and the 80s. And I think they kept them well into the 1990s and beyond. The Israelis don't throw away very much, but they had a lot of these vehicles. And of course, what they did there was they introduced the roll bar on the side of the vehicle to because these little vehicles and maybe the roads that they had over there, they were apt to overturn from time to time. That roll bar was very, very lucky for a lot of people. Anyway, our model here has a three-man crew, driver, of course. Next to him is a sitting either officer or NCO looking through his binos, and then mounting the machine gun on the back. And I think it's the general purpose machine gun, GPMG, is another gunner. But at the same time, we've added some little extras, and you'll see right on the bonnet of the M151 is the M16 with the 203 grenade launcher, and of course, an Uzi submachine gun, the very famous Israeli machine gun of that period. So those come with it, along with the two different radio antennas, lots of little nick, and there's a radio in the back as well of this machine. And of course, apart from the machine gun there, there's another GPMG on a side mount on the side of the vehicle. You'll also see there, apart from the roll bar, there's another bar on the front to stop anybody stringing wire across the road to decapitate people coming along in open jeeps like this. And again, that was something that first came to prominence in World War II, where a lot of jeeps in Europe adopted the same tactic of having a bar on the front of the jeep to knock out any wires that have been stretched across the road. So that's and by the way, in Israeli service, this little Jeep was not called the Mutt, it was called the SHMIRA. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Obviously, it's Hebrew for something, but that's the name of it. The M151 SHMIRA. So look out for it. Great add-on set. So if you're into the I.D.F figures, this will be one for you. Now, let's end up, if that's the right way to put it, with these two aircraft here. Again, those of you that collect King Country warbirds will remember, almost, I think 11, 12 years ago, we introduced our very first Japanese Zeros, and these were among the most popular warbirds that we ever produced. Now, the ones that we produced back then were early war, I think A6M2 Mitsubishi Zeros, and these were the ones that we did then were Imperial Japanese Navy, and we really covered those that took part in the attack on Pearl Harbor. So they were in the classic pale grey of the Imperial Japanese Navy. They sold out a long, long time ago, but from time to time we were getting people asking, "Oh, will you do the Zero again?" Well, we decided, yeah, let's do it. And but we thought, let's upgrade it, and that's exactly what we did. And we upgraded from the original model, the A6M2, to the last model, the A6M5. Now, what you see in front of you is two different versions, both dating from 1944, late 1944, 45. This one here is what we're calling the Kamikaze Zero. And again, some of you will know that by the late stage of the war, where obviously the Japanese were being pressed very hard, particularly by the US Navy and US Marines in the Pacific, that the Imperial Japanese Navy was no longer the force that it had been in the early stages of the war. And they were really on the back foot, and they were fighting as hard as they could, but quite frankly, they were outnumbered and outclassed, particularly by the US Navy and its ships and aircraft carriers. So the A6M5 was trying to combat that as best it could, but quite frankly, even by then, it was out of date as well. So what they decided to do was, I'm not quite sure who decided, but a decision was made that volunteer pilots would actually crash their aircraft directly into American and British ships in the Pacific as a final resort to stop the onslaught onto Japan itself. And what they did was they would permanently fix bombs under the fuselage. And I'll lift this up. If you look underneath here, you'll see what is a 500-pound bomb that has been fixed into position. It cannot be dropped. It's actually you're meant to crash the aircraft in, and of course that'll explode the bomb, and the aircraft itself will add to the mayhem and confusion. So this was very much a one-way trip. Many of these young pilots had relatively little experience and went straight from the training schools to kamikaze units. Now, the reason they were called kamikaze is goes way back to, I think it was the 1261, around that time. There was a Mongolian fleet that was heading towards Japan, and everybody expected the worst. Well, the worst happened, but not to Japan, to the fleet of the Mongols themselves. There was a huge storm happened at sea, and it literally destroyed the Mongol fleet. Now, the Japanese came to call that, obviously in Japanese, but the English translation is the divine wind, which translates as kamikaze. So they were taking the inspiration from that miraculous victory over an enemy to try to achieve the same results by crashing their own aircraft into enemy ships, particularly aircraft carriers and larger ships if they could. But by this late stage of the war, they basically crashed into any Allied ship that was on the seas, approaching their area of tactical responsibility. So this is a typical A6M20. As you can see, it's already had fairly hard service because a lot of the paintwork is both faded and chipped. So some of these aircraft had already seen lots of action, so perhaps they were on their last legs anyway. But that's how we've painted it up. Still, of course, got what they call the Japanese meatball on the wings and the fuselage, but it's got that fixed 500-pound bomb underneath. And if you look closely, you'll get a closer look at this later. This one comes with a seated pilot who's giving his final salute to his comrades on the ground or to the ground crew that have just fixed up the aircraft and are wishing him on his way. So a great little set. And again, with the new propellers that we've got that really, they turn beautifully. We've got this one here. Now, the second of our zeros is still an A6M5, similar color scheme, but a wee bit different. Now, again, I mentioned the fact that by this late stage of the war, American bombers were bombing Japan almost on a daily basis, and their main targets were factories and industrial areas, but not even that. They were just carpet bombing cities. And many of these cities, of course, were made out of wood in those days. The buildings were made out of wood. So they just went up like a tinder box. Anyway, the Japanese still managed to put some aircraft into the air, but but the factories themselves just couldn't produce in any numbers. So aircraft that had perhaps been damaged in other conflicts were sort of stripped of anything that could be useful, and it would be bolted on to parts of another aircraft. So here you've got quite an unusual paint scheme. You've got the outer wings and part of the fuselage there have perhaps come from an Imperial Japanese Navy aircraft because they're still in that pale grey color scheme, as you can see, but allied with the standard dark green livery of late war Japanese aircraft. Now, this one, uh, again, an advantage over the previous aircraft is uh, we've got opening and closing canopies, and this one comes with a standing fighter pilot, Japanese fighter pilot on the side. However, we've also thought to add another two individual Japanese pilot figures that you can buy separately if you want to make up an airfield scene. Uh, an interesting little story. One of them is a saluting pilot, so he could be in fact saluting his friend that's about to take off in his final kamikaze flight. The other chap here, interesting story. Last year, my wife and myself went on a walking holiday in Japan, and we ended up in Tokyo. And one of my favorite destinations is the Yasukuni Shrine. Now, within or next to the Yasukuni Shrine is an amazing Japanese military museum, which covers um, basically Japan's military history from uh, the earliest times, all through the period of the samurais to the shoguns, all the way into when they took over Korea in the early part of the 20th century, or perhaps even the late 19th century, to the wars against China, and of course the wars against the Allies in the Pacific. What's really interesting is as you go to enter the museum, there's a statue, life-size statue outside of a kamikaze pilot. And the pose is this figure here is actually based on the photographs I took of that statue outside the museum. When you go into the museum to buy your ticket to go in, what you will discover right next to the opposite the ticket booth is an actual A6M Mitsubishi Zero, one of the few that managed to survive the war. And it's in the same dark green livery that you see both these aircraft. So if any of you are fortunate enough to visit Japan, especially Tokyo, then I recommend you visit the military museum next to, might be part of, the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo. It's an amazing place with incredible models and all kinds of fantastic exhibits. Well worth a visit. So there you have it. Almost everything, except for, once again, the little poster you see here. Between the 17th and 19th of April, King and Country, myself and a team from head office here are taking part for the first time in the Beijing Hobby Expo. It's got actually full title is Hobby Expo China. We went last year for a look-see and it blew us away. Unbelievable. On the first day, 40,000 people attended the show. And every day after that, in fact, I think on the Saturday, at one point, they actually had to close the doors. They couldn't let any more people in. It was so crowded, but it was fantastic. We made lots of friends. We met quite a few King and Country collectors, and it was them that said, hey, why don't you guys have a booth here? So we thought about it and we investigated it, and we managed to get ourselves a small booth this year, and we're going to put on our very first exhibition in China itself. So that's from the 17th to the 19th of April, which is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If any of you happen to find yourselves in Beijing that weekend, then stop by and say hello. Look forward to seeing many of our collectors and friends in China. And well, I'm looking forward to the show itself. There's always lots of things to see, and it covers all aspects of every kind of hobby that boys and men like, meaning all kinds of die-cast car models, ship models, radio-controlled air models, lots of radio-controlled tanks. Oh, it's just amazing. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And Beijing itself is a city you've got to see. To those of us in the West who hadn't seen it, and I hadn't been to Beijing until I went last year, it literally blew me away. My goodness, the infrastructure that they've built over the last, say, 20 years is awesome. And it's a fantastic place to visit, so much to see. So, on that cheerful note, I look forward to seeing at least some of you up in Beijing. But if I don't see you in Beijing, I'll certainly be speaking to you this time next month. Thanks again, and cheers. Hi guys. Well, as you know, every month we have dispatches which lets you know about all the recent releases, and we make a point of showing everything. But another part of dispatches is at the very end, where we let you know what's being retired. And I think that's always a useful exercise, because many people unfortunately don't get to see certain items because either they're just online with their dealer, or they don't often get to visit a toy soldier shop. So we thought we'd add something new this month, and I hope we'll continue it in the coming months, where we tell you a little bit about what's being retired, but also give you a little look at it as well. So this is what's being retired this month, April. And as you can see, a lot of what you see in front of you is very much in the way of King and Country accessories and the SP collection. And there's some unique pieces here. So if I may, I'll go through them with you. Let's start at the back here. Now, this is our traditional European farmhouse. This is actually the second version of a farmhouse that we've done. The older one was much smaller and not nearly as detailed as this one. But you'll see that if you look closely, you'll get a closer look, because my camera guy here and my director Douglas will do roundabout close-ups with some of these items at the end of this. So this particular farmhouse, a little bit of battle damage to it, as you can see. But if you look closely, above the doorway is the plaque that reads 1615. And we chose that year because we thought this would be something that collectors could use with even some of our English Civil War figures, pike and musket, the Three Musketeers, which goes by about 1620, 1630, all the way up through the American Revolutionary period to Napoleonic times, and then straight into the 20th century with World War I, World War II. Really useful piece of background. And again, produced a few years ago. We still got a few left. And we thought you should know about this, because you probably won't see this kind of thing again, because they're so much more expensive to produce today than they were a few years ago. So my advice would be, if you don't have this farmhouse, grab it while you can. It's a terrific piece and very flexible. That's the farmhouse. Next to the farmhouse is the farm gate. And again, terrific little piece, as you can see here with the two gates. Turn it around the other side, take off this here, both gates open. Very, very useful. Now, to be honest, the inspiration for this was La Haye Saint and the farmhouse that played such an important part in the Battle of Waterloo. And that basically gave us the idea to do this. Another terrific standalone piece. Now, if you choose, you can buy a pair of wall sections. Now, these can add on to this. Let me just show you. Fit beautifully and extend it and give you an extra dimension to your display. So, the farmhouse gate, two individual wall sections. In front of that is another really outstanding piece, and that is our gates and walls sections here. And here we've got little metal gate. And again, if you've seen some of our work previously, you'll have seen this used for World War II scenes with American paratroopers or German stormtroopers moving through, or even you'll see it with, we've used it for Napoleonics. I think we used it in some World War One scenarios as well. We even used it in for Black Hawk Down, and what was the other one? Well, it'll come to me, but we've used it a few times. I think we even used it in Vietnam. Talking of Vietnam, we've got the Viet Cong sampan. This is actually two sets. There's the sampan itself and the little man or woman at the back here that's steering the sampan, and then the additional little three-man set of Viet Cong figures. Terrific little figures. Come with no base, but they all sit beautifully inside the sampan itself. Great little set. Grab this if you're a Vietnam collector. I really urge you. It's a great piece. Now, something else that was also produced for the Vietnam collection was the sandbag emplacement, or semicircular sandbag emplacement, and we did that when we were promoting our 105mm howitzer for the Australians and also for the American Marines. You can put that in there. You can put any of our mortar sections in there as well. Really useful. Look out for this one. Right down the front here, something completely different. The three little corgis here. Now, again, many of you will remember that we actually used the corgis. In fact, we designed the corgis to go along with the Queen Elizabeth figure. But we had a lot of people asking, oh, are the dogs available separately? And we said, sure. So we made some available. Well, this has come to the end. I think we've only got 20 sets of this three little dog, very reasonably priced. Great little dog figures, can be used in all kinds of different scenarios. So take my advice. If you want it, if you don't want it, I'll still give it. Grab these three little dogs. Great value, very useful in all kinds of scenarios, or in fact, any of these other structural pieces which really help bring a diorama alive. And one other thing that I'll just mention here, so I'm going to mention two things, in fact. Many of you have heard me talk about, I'm going to produce a book on dioramas, the King and Country dioramas that have been produced over the years. I think I may have mentioned before, over the years, my late brother Gordon, myself, and a few other choice individuals have been producing King and Country dioramas for almost 30 years. Most of this first volume, and this is, I hope there'll be more than one volume, but this first volume is a tribute to Gordon. And you'll see some of his very finest dioramas, large ones, small ones, and everything in between. It's an incredible variety. My intention is that this will be available in the autumn. I've already started work on it. It's coming along great. Some terrific photographs, and Douglas, the cameraman here, is going to be helping me put that together. So I'll keep you posted as it develops. The provisional working title is going to be Every Picture Tells a Story. If that's familiar, that title, I'll be honest, I lifted that from a Rod Stewart album many, many moons ago. One of my favorite singers, and believe it or not, someone who has some king and country toy soldiers in his personal collection. So there you have it. So I'm sure Rod doesn't mind if we just borrow that title, but that's what it will be. Every picture tells a story, and it'll be the stories as well as the photographs behind the dioramas. So on that cheerful note, adios for now, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.